When the lights go out, the stories begin. Step into the shadows with Novella Station, where every tale drips with dread, suspense, and the thrill of the unknown. From haunted whispers to chilling encounters, our horror stories will keep you hooked and looking over your shoulder. Dare to listen. Dare to feel the fear. Dare to enter Novella Station. Your nightmares have found a home. Story name is The Sound Beyond the Ridge. Inspired by the Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959, where 9 experienced hikers died under mysterious circumstances in Russia's Ural Mountains. Their tent was found cut open from inside, bodies scattered across the mountainside with unexplained injuries, and the official investigation concluded only that an unknown compelling force caused their deaths. The following is a work of fiction. Sarah Chen heard it first. "Stop," she whispered, holding up one gloved hand. The other 4 members of their winter expedition halted on the snowy ridge, their breath forming small clouds in the February darkness. "What?" Marcus adjusted his headlamp, the beam cutting through the night. "Listen." They stood in silence at 11,000 feet, surrounded by the Canadian Rockies. The wind had died completely, unusual for this exposed ridgeline, and in that vacuum of sound, something else emerged. A hum, low, almost subsonic, not mechanical, not natural, probably just the wind in the valley, Marcus said, but his voice carried doubt. "There is no wind," said Dmitri, their Russian guide, and Sarah noticed his hand had moved to the ice axe on his belt, an unconscious gesture she'd seen soldiers make when reaching for weapons. "We should set up camp," suggested Amy Park, the youngest of their group. "We're losing light." They'd planned to camp below the tree line, but a rockslide had blocked their intended route, forcing them higher than anticipated. Now they were on this barren ridge, nothing but snow and stone and the vast indifference of the mountains. 30 minutes to set up the tent, Marcus decided. He was nominally their leader, though Sarah suspected that designation meant little in a place like this, where the mountain made its own decisions about who lived and who didn't. They worked quickly, their movements practiced. Sarah had been on a dozen expeditions, and the rhythm of setting up camp was meditative: stake, pole, tighten, repeat. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them work. When she glanced up at the peaks above, she saw nothing but starlight on snow. Yet the feeling persisted. The tent went up. They crawled inside, 5 people in a space meant for 4, but the proximity meant warmth. Marcus lit their small camp stove, and soon they were passing around a pot of rehydrated stew that tasted like salted cardboard and was absolutely delicious. "We'll make up the time tomorrow," Marcus said, studying his map. "If we start at first light, we can." The humming sound returned, louder now, vibrating through the ground beneath them. "Okay, that's not wind," Amy said. Dmitri unzipped the tent entrance and looked out. Sarah watched his profile in the lamplight: weathered face, gray beard, eyes that had seen things in the Caucasus Mountains that he never spoke about. Those eyes widened now. "Lights," he said simply. They tumbled out into the cold. The sky above the western peaks pulsed with color. Not the aurora borealis, which Sarah had seen before, but something more concentrated, more deliberate. Spheres of orange and white light moved across the mountaintops in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. "What the hell is that?" Marcus breathed. "Military flares?" Amy suggested. "We're 60 miles from a nearest base," Sarah said, "and flares don't move like that." The lights descended, following the ridge line toward them. The humming intensified, and Sarah felt it in her chest now, in her teeth, a frequency that seemed designed to resonate with bone and tissue. "Back in the tent," Dmitri said, but he didn't move. None of them did. They stood transfixed as the lights drew closer, and with them came a heat that seemed impossible in the sub-zero night. Sarah felt sweat forming under her parka. The snow around their tent began to melt, creating a circle of bare rock that expanded outward. "This isn't natural," she said, and the words felt absurdly inadequate. The lights stopped 50 yards away, hovering at eye level. Up close, they weren't spheres. They were more complex, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, as if her brain couldn't quite process what her eyes were seeing. And then the pressure started. It began as a headache, sharp and sudden, but quickly became something more invasive. Sarah felt a presence pushing against her thoughts, not hostile exactly, but utterly indifferent to whether she wanted it there. Images flashed through her mind, memories that weren't hers, places she'd never been, mathematical concepts she didn't understand. Amy screamed. The sound broke the spell. Marcus grabbed her, and suddenly they were all moving, stumbling away from the lights, down the slope, into the darkness beyond their camp. The tent, someone shouted, but the heat was intensifying, and Sarah could smell burning nylon. Their shelter, their supplies, everything was cooking in that impossible warmth. They ran, down the ridge, slipping on loose scree, then into the tree line where scraggly pines offered some illusion of shelter. Sarah's lungs burned, her face felt scorched despite the cold, and she realized with distant horror that she'd unbuckled her parka and was tearing at it, desperate to escape the heat. Behind them, the lights had stopped at the tree line, as if some invisible barrier prevented them from entering the forest. They hovered there, pulsing, and Sarah understood with terrible clarity that they were waiting. Fire! Dmitri gasped when they finally collapsed in a small clearing. Need fire. Cold will kill us now. He was right. In their panic, they'd fled wearing only base layers and partially removed parkas. The sweat from that inexplicable heat was already freezing on Sarah's skin. Marcus and Amy gathered wood, while Dmitri coaxed a flame from his emergency lighter. Sarah tried to inventory what they had: a knife, one lighter, the clothes on their backs. Everything else was gone. We wait until dawn, Marcus said through chattering teeth. Then we head down. Emergency descent. Forget the route plan. And if those things come back? Amy asked. No one answered. The fire caught, and they huddled around it. Sarah looked at their faces in the flickering light. Marcus trying to project confidence he didn't feel, Amy barely holding back tears, Dmitri staring into the flames with the 1,000-yard stare of someone processing trauma. And the fifth member of their group. Sarah's heart stopped. Where's Dr. Hayes? They looked at each other in horror. Jim Hayes, the quiet physicist from MIT who'd joined their expedition to clear his head after a difficult semester. Sarah tried to remember the last time she'd seen him, but the panic and flight were a blur. He was right behind me, Amy said. When we ran, he was... A scream echoed from up the slope. Human, male, abruptly cut off. Jesus Christ, Marcus Vispirid. Dmitri was already standing. We go back. That's insane, Sarah said, but she was pulling on what remained of her parka, even as she said it. You didn't leave people behind. That was the iron rule of the mountains. They climbed back up the slope, moving slowly now, trying to stay quiet. The lights were still there, hovering at the tree line, but they seemed focused on something else, a shape in the snow near their destroyed camp. Dr. Hayes lay sprawled on the bare rock, his body twisted at angles that didn't quite make sense. As they watched, one of the lights descended toward him, and in its glow Sarah saw something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Hayes sat up, but it wasn't Hayes anymore, not entirely. His movements were wrong, jerky, and mechanical, like a puppet with tangled strings. His head turned toward them, and his eyes reflected the orange light in a way human eyes shouldn't. Run, Dmitri said quietly. This time they listened. They crashed back down through the trees, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind them, Sarah heard something moving, footsteps that didn't quite match human rhythm, accompanied by that awful humming sound. Split up, Marcus gasped. Meet at the valley floor. The river. It went against every rule of wilderness survival, but Sarah understood the logic. Whatever was following them, whatever Hayes had become, it could only chase one group. She veered left with Dmitri, while Marcus and Amy went right. The forest was a nightmare of shadows and grasping branches. Sarah's face was bleeding from a dozen small cuts, and she'd lost feeling in her feet, but she kept running because the alternative was unthinkable. They reached a ravine and slid down the steep embankment, landing in deep snow at the bottom. Dmitri pulled her under an overhang of rock and frozen earth, and they pressed themselves into the darkness, trying to control their ragged breathing. Above, they heard footsteps, slow, searching. The humming grew louder, and orange light filtered down into the ravine. Sarah looked at Dmitri and saw her own terror reflected in his eyes. This wasn't how expeditions were supposed to end. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. The footsteps paused directly above them. "Sarah," a voice called out. Hayes's voice, but flat, emotionless. Sarah Chun, born June 12, 1989. Boulder, Colorado. PhD in geology from Stanford. "You're injured. You're cold. This makes you vulnerable to..." Dmitri clamped a hand over Sarah's mouth as she started to whimper. How did it know those things? How did it know her? Environmental factors, the Hayes thing continued. Your survival probability decreases by 3.7% per hour at current temperature. This is inefficient. Allow us to help. The humming intensified, and Sarah felt that pressure against her mind again, stronger now, more insistent. It wanted in. It wanted to catalog her, understand her, perhaps improve her the way it had improved Hayes. She bit down on her own hand, using pain to anchor herself. Beside her, Dmitri was praying in Russian, quiet, desperate words to a god who seemed very far away. The footsteps moved on. They waited in that hole for hours, long past the point when the footsteps faded, long past the point when the humming stopped. They waited until the first gray light of dawn filtered into the ravine, and even then they waited longer, because sometimes monsters were patient. Finally, moving like old people, they climbed out of the ravine. The forest was silent. The lights were gone. The sky was the pale blue of mountain morning, beautiful and indifferent. They found Marcus and Amy at the river, hypothermic but alive. They never found Dr. Hayes. The helicopter rescue came 6 hours later, summoned by their emergency beacon. The medics treated them for severe frostbite, hypothermia, and shock. The authorities asked questions about their destroyed camp, about Hayes, about what had happened. Sarah told them about a sudden storm, about getting separated, about Hayes falling. She didn't mention the lights. Neither did the others. Because who would believe them? And because, deep down, Sarah understood that some things didn't want to be talked about. Some things preferred to remain unexplained, operating in the spaces between what people could accept and what their minds would rather forget. 3 months later, Sarah received a package at her university office. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. Against her better judgment, she plugged it in. A single video file. Grainy, night vision footage from what looked like a military drone. Date stamp. The night of their expedition. The footage showed their campsite from above. Showed the lights descending. Showed 5 figures fleeing down the mountain. And showed something else. Shapes in the snow that the human I couldn't quite process, moving with terrible purpose. While in the sky above, more lights gathered like vultures circling prey. The video ended with a burst of static and a single line of text. Phenomenon continues. Observation ongoing. Do not return to area. Sarah deleted the file, destroyed the USB drive, and never spoke of it again. But sometimes, late at night, she still heard that humming sound in her dreams. And she wondered how many other people in how many other mountains had run screaming from their tents into the killing cold, fleeing something that human language had no words to describe. The mountains kept their secrets. They always had. Did tonight's tale send shivers down your spine or leave you wanting more? If you liked the video, let us know what part made your heart race. If not, tell us what kind of horror you'd love to hear next. Your comments guide our nightmares. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more thrilling, horror-filled tales from Novella Station. The darkness is waiting. Will you return?